Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chips and Bits podcast. It's Kenny Myers here with my friend and associate,
Matthew Anderson.
That's right. You ever see those Micro Machine commercials when you were growing up?
Sure did.
They had them in Canada?
Yes, we had most things in Canada.
Did they have a Canadian Micro Machines guy?
Nope.
Oh, that's too bad, because I really liked how he talked really fast while he was doing about the fabulous Micro Machines. And I feel like I had a future in that. Or just being on a mystical track. Anyway, we got some business to take care of. As always, you can sign up as a Patreon, and if you are a Patreon, you can actually view the live stream right now on YouTube as it's happening. But you're not if you don't know that, and it's really fun. You can see very exciting things happen as we set up for a review podcast.
Yeah, that's great.
That's Chips and Bits. You can just search for us on Patreon. You can also go to our website, chips-and-bits.com, where it links to that Patreon, as well as our iTunes for reviews. You can subscribe on Spotify to us now, which is super cool, and also is the best display next to our website of this podcast and all the hard work Matt does.
Especially in the car.
Yeah, I mean, it looks so good because Matt just really puts his heart into it, and I half-ass most of it. Yeah, and I think that's it. I think we should probably cue the theme, huh?
Go for it, man. You're in charge.
All right, we're going to do that now.
It's nice. That song, that song ages pretty good.
I just realized that the stream just sees, like, I didn't set up Streamlabs to correctly, like, when I switched to the title card, it didn't send the audio of the, it does switch to the title card. Looks great, got a fade transition, but I forgot to set up the audio for the thing. So sorry about that. But you got to, like, a very zen picture of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, today we are talking about The Witness. The Witness is a game by famed video game developer Jonathan Blow, who made Braid, which did we review? Is that one of our things that we reviewed? I forget. I don't think that was before our time.
Don't think. Yeah, I mean, I definitely.
We certainly talked about it and played it. Yeah, but he was the writer of and creator of Braid, which was a one-man operation, and then he expanded all that money into The Witness, which I would best describe as a Myst-style puzzle game. You think that's a fair thing? It's hard to describe it, really. It is indescribable, but Matt,
yeah, I mean, I get it.
Would you like to give it a go?
It's a puzzle game, for sure. And certainly it takes place on an island. So when you're thinking through games to try to compare this to something, the first games that come up are Myst and Riven. But it's also not really like anything you've played. So I would just say it's a unique puzzle game.
Yeah, I would say it's like the island of Mr. Riven with iPad puzzles on it, pretty much.
Yeah, and also like less of the sort of like there's almost no
storytelling.
Lore. Yeah, there's almost no lore in this game.
I mean,
so,
there's. Sorry, please. I'm keeping interrupting because I'm so excited to talk about The Witness.
That's what the difference. The main difference between those styles of games is that Myst, there's deep lore and storytelling that sort of draws you through trying to figure out the puzzles. Whereas in The Witness, it's more just the mechanics and whether you find those engaging and the learning aspects, like the educational aspect of the game is what draws you through. There's almost no lore to compare it to Myst or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like most of the game is exploring how far Jonathan Blow has stuck his head up his own asshole. Like, that's the central mystery of The Witness. So let's talk about, I want to talk about a couple things with The Witness, but a little history, Chips and Bits history, or Bitstory, as we're calling these segments now. We're not calling these segments.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we don't do segments.
Yeah, I also don't like to veto things, so I'm glad you just withdrew it.
That's true. You're a yes man. we had originally, this game came out, what, 2018? 19?
Don't know. I could look it up for
2000, could you look it up? Anyway, Matt was very excited about this game, and I thought it would be cool, but I vetoed reviewing this because I didn't want to put in the effort. And Matt just kind of stopped playing it at that point.
2016.
Yep, that's right around then. So this has been on the chopping block for a bit. But recently, the timing and feeling were correct, where Matt just sort of dove into it again. I don't know what prompted you to dive into it.
What prompted it? Oh, it's a fun video game story, actually. What prompted it was
part of our bit story.
Yeah, part of. Oh, Jesus. If, if you have access to our patron only podcast every month, one of the things we do in that podcast is we bring a game to the table that's either not in depth enough or not fun enough or whatever the rationale is, that we're not actually going to podcast about it, but we did spend some time with it and have some opinions about it.
Or that Matt just won't play.
Or that I won't play. Right.
Really just Matt won't play.
So one of those games we brought to the table a few months back was an indie game, puzzle game called Maquette.
Oh, yeah.
And it was fine, not good enough to podcast about, and it had tons of issues. And so
I
didn't
want to play
the table. Yeah, no. But the one thing it did do, which I considered to be a pro, was it inspired me to start thinking about The Witness again. And then we actually have a mutual friend that was chatting with me about that game as well. And he said exactly the same thing. He was like, yeah, I stopped playing Maquette, but I actually started playing The Witness again. So it was just like perfect storm of puzzle games that came back together.
I feel like we should just start naming him. I mean, at this point, he's like intrinsically linked to a lot of our gaming adventures. I
mean, that's totally your call. It could remain a mystery, though.
That is true.
For
but he is a lord, so he is a Scottish lord. So we if we're gonna do it, we got to be respectful of it. Let's call him the Scottish Lord.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So anyway, the Scottish Lord knew the Scottish Lord, of course, who was also interested in this game when it came out. You two more so than me, or I, decided to take it up, and then in one of my moods of fancy, where I was feeling more generous than I usually am to you, I was like, "Hey, I could play this game. Like, I feel like a puzzler right now, and I do love puzzle games." I mean, our first game was Portal 2, and that's essentially just a puzzle game,
And I was so excited that you decided to play it, and can't wait to hear what you thought about it.
I can't wait to share with you what I thought about it. So, Matt, I mean, tell them more about The Witness and and I'd like to hear how you felt about the game.
So probably the better way to describe this is just to tell you a little bit about how the game starts. The game starts like so. You get a title screen, you hit start new game, and you're in a tunnel. And you start walking through the tunnel forward towards the light. There's no instructions, there's no nothing. And you come across a door. And there's a pretty simple looking little diagram. It's just a little dot with a line. And you figure out pretty quick without any instruction that you can tap on the dot and draw a line to the end of that, to the final point, and the door unlocks and opens, and then you're out of the tunnel and into another room. And then the game continues from that point forward. Each room and each door and or puzzle that you encounter is an ever-increasing, more complicated version of the puzzles that came before it, for the most part. Every once in a while, there's pretty heavy tangents that happen within the learning and education system of the puzzle mechanics, and you have to sort of take a break and go find out another mechanic and come back and revisit those puzzles because you don't have enough information. But essentially, that's the game. So I think at a high level, one of the things that makes this interesting is that it falls in that realm of sort of like, how gamey is this game? Because even when we think of what you were just referring to, like puzzle games, even if puzzles are their core mechanic, still usually have like a character or characters or stories or something other than the main puzzle mechanic that you're actually going to play around with. Like in Portal, you've got characters and story, and all these other things. In Witness, you don't really have any of that. There's some stuff there, but it's not really a story. It's just stuff, just information. So that's
I would say this is a very gamey game. I'm surprised you brought that up. I would say this isn't like a story driven game, but it feels. I mean, I never didn't think like I was playing Firewatch or something. Like there was always
oh
objectives and interesting
yeah,
things
yeah,
to
yeah.
do. Well,
I
interesting,
I
quote
actually
unquote.
agree too. I'm just saying there's not much to describe of the game part of it other than you
You
solve
just go
puzzles.
around
That's the
solving
game.
puzzles on your iPads. That's
Yep.
what you
Yep.
do.
That's the game. So that's that's kind of how it starts. It's if it's something we haven't talked about in quite a while, but one of the things that I actually love
Is
about
how it teaches you
many
how to
games that
do
I've
things.
played, yeah,
This is it.
is when you
I
can
knew it.
get dropped inside of something in an
Yeah,
environment in a world, and you can figure out how
like
to
Dark Souls.
play. Yeah, exactly like that. That's one of the things that that I do appreciate about it. Um, so yeah, in that sense, the game really made me feel like I was slowly but surely becoming an expert. Now, I think the first point of sort of what I can imagine to be contention for anyone to play this game, and what I would love to hear your feedback on, is that unlike other situations, I can definitely see where you're becoming an expert slowly but surely. You're learning, right? But you're learning nothing really. Like you're learning someone else's suggestion for like something that they thought would be fun for you to learn. Now, if you don't think that's fun, or you don't enjoy what's being taught to you, since there's nothing else in it, I could imagine this game just like falling in, off a cliff for a player really quickly. Fortunately for me, that wasn't the case, but I have no idea if you felt the same way and if you really enjoyed what was being taught to you or not.
I mean, this game is way too fucking long. Like it was just way too long. Like there's like there's so many different elements to it. Uh it did have very very frustrating puzzles. Not good puzzles, I felt. Like frustrating puzzles. Ones that when you solved, I mean there were still some puzzles that I solved that honestly was just like what is that solution? I don't quite understand it. And maybe that's the training mechanic. But I will tell you that I got to the last area. So first there's like a whole meta game thing which we can talk about in a little bit, but really like you go through these different areas and you unlock these lasers that point to this hill where there's these stone people holding a
Mm-hmm.
box, like I don't know, like fucking containing just one of Jonathan Blow's amazing ideas. Um and it opens and I was like finally I'm done, and it opens to like a portal-esque like center where you have to go different levels and do all this clever stuff that
Mm-hmm.
is I mean it's clever, but I feel like a lot of times this game is too clever for its own good, like like where it's less fun and more like the cleverness is it's like really bad um fiction where it just tries to be too clever. Anyway, at that point, when I opened the little hole and I was like, "Oh, there's more puzzles," I just started looking up answers and going through the whole area. I just
In
cheated.
the mountain,
I cheated the entire mountain all the way down to the ending. Yeah, I looked up every
that's too
single
bad.
answer. I was so bored and frustrated, and there were some of them that I was like, "This is clever," but really, it was just like like it was too much at that point. Um, I really, uh, I really enjoyed this game at the beginning, but it just felt like when you accomplish something, again, like you were further getting up Jonathan Blow's ass and just looking around and being like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, there's, in my opinion, the most talented abstract works are grounded in something you can hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something that you can relate to in it. But this is like a peyote trip of a story, like or like it's just so out there that you can't really like conceptualize what uh his vision is for like what who you are, what you're doing, or any of the island and anything. Now it's called The Witness, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously like there's this like witnessing capability of it, like you're being watched by things. There's all these different layers of witnesses, but it just got really frustrating to me, like unlocking like the movies. You can unlock certain movies that are like incredibly cryptic, and just so fucking stupid. They're like
Movies are so dumb.
they're like someone went to like they finished their community college film school course and decided to make a movie about something like what's really important, and and it was so gross that I didn't want to continue doing that. And
Hmm.
like the puzzles were great. Oh, those fucking Tetris puzzles though, those were the worst. Um, and it was cool unlocking areas, uh, and it was even cooler when initially you run into puzzles that like you're doing all these similar puzzles and then the environment becomes the puzzle separate from these pads you've been using for a while, and so then you're observing the environment for essentially like where's Waldo style connecting lines that are all about lining up perspective, and like you could like look in the sand and see the pattern and try to match it up, and then you can select it. And that was cool. I liked that at first, but then I just didn't want to do any more of them. But I was so bored by the end of this. But I enjoyed like I want to say 50% of it. 50% of it I was totally in, and then the last 50% I was just like, this is just I'm just getting frustrated a lot. The puzzles are fine. Like they're just like they're a lot of the same stuff. Like they try to be too clever and it fucks up the flow. I just it's fine. It's
Hmm.
a fine game.
Uh, well, so I'll start with, for one, I think that's a really fair criticism. Um, the it's almost why I shied away from even saying anything about story in this game in the first place. I think that everything that you would typically describe in any other game as story in The Witness, it's absolutely obtuse. And more importantly, I don't feel that any benefit, whether perceived or just something that you just thought took place, importantly, makes any difference to the game itself. And so, in hindsight, there's part of me which, in the beginning when I first finished it, I thought, man, the puzzles were great. So there's a lot of great stuff in this game, not just the puzzles. Like the world itself is beautifully realized. All the different areas are unique. They look really great. Um, and even though the mechanic is simple and straightforward, as Kenny alluded to, it gets absolutely out of control and like super complicated to the fact where sometimes you really feel like some of these things just won't be solvable. So
It's
even
very
though
clever.
it's
Like it's
yeah,
really a clever game. Like
yeah,
how they teach you. I do agree with you on the fact that like the way that they teach you is really good until you run into an area that you don't have the right lesson for and you don't know where to find that lesson for and you're
yep,
stuck for like an hour trying to scour the island at a slow pace for one stupid puzzle. Like that wasn't fun. It's not
yeah.
really
I
a
think
it's not really an exploration game. Like there's not a lot of reward in exploration. There's a lot of reward in puzzle solving.
yeah. I feel like there were some aspects where you had to treat it like an exploration game,
Right.
but yeah, I'm not sure that you should have had to. Like they do. I would say I think there's what 9 areas, 9 or 10 areas, and for the first three that you encounter, it's almost even though it's still difficult and the progression is challenging, it's fairly linear. You can
Right.
get through each area, and then just seemingly for no apparent reason, in the third or fourth area, all of a sudden it's just like, huh, I thought I'd been following all the patterns. I feel like I've learned everything. I literally cannot continue. And it forces you to break that current pattern of sort of just figuring things out and go and just explore around. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty big and vast place. And so like going back and forth between the areas isn't really the most fun thing to do all the time. And you also have to then, if you're smart, start keeping whether it's mental notes or physical notes, which is what I did, start to keep track of where you left off and what you forgot and what you needed, so that when you randomly encounter that in one of the other areas, you can be like, oh, right, that's from area number 3. I've got to go back and like close that loop. Um,
That actually, one thing I was thinking about, which I also used a pad of paper. We famously
yeah,
we shared these with each other. Uh, I actually feel like when I have to bring out a piece of paper for anything, that it's a failure of game design. Like
interesting.
I feel like the tools in the game should be enough to figure out how to solve the things. And I feel like using external tools is a failure of game design, hands
Cool.
down.
Well, we could have that argument, I guess, if you want to, because I would strongly disagree with that sentiment. Part of the reason why I was fine with the relation point to Myst when you first brought it up is because I can't remember the last time I actually did that in a game previous to Myst. And I still have, like, in a box somewhere, my old notebook of all the sketches and puzzle solutions and drawings that I made while I was going around the island in Myst. And it's fun. Like, that aspect of it is like another part of the game that, if you're into it, is actually really enjoyable to, like, look through your notes and see that
I'm
stuff.
so glad you brought that up, because I also wanted to bring up that I brought up those comparisons, but failed to mention that I fucking hated those games.
Well, it makes sense as to why this one would have been problematic then.
This one was easier to get into than those games. I'll give it that much. And it had a
Sure.
better training mechanism than Myst was
It's
just like, here's very hard
yeah,
puzzles.
it's more approachable. But
Yeah.
to the point that, like, you know, if you're not this is it's nothing more than a puzzle game. Or, like, it tries to be. Like, don't get like, I totally agree with you. Like, the whole philosophy and weird obfuscated story thing that's woven in it, I mean, it's there, but, like, for most purposes, you should just ignore that and just pretend like it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
even
Because it
exist.
genuinely makes the game less enjoyable.
I
Like,
agree.
if
I
it was
agree.
just a straight puzzle, like, and even exploration game to some degree, where you just got to the end and it was like a congratulations banner pops down, like,
Mhm.
that would be more fulfilling than finding all those fucking stupid things.
Which reminds me, I failed to make my original point with that little, like, tangent I was going on, which was that when I first finished the game, and there's a finish to the game, and then there's a second finish to the game as well,
Is
which
there
I
also a Danish and a Swedish?
no. Um,
Waka
there's
waka.
there's a completion, and then there's a second one as well. Um, when I got to the end of the first one, I thought, this game should have had better story. Like, I wish it had more story, better drivers, better story, better mechanic
Is this the
there.
finish I got? Like
Yeah,
the one where
probably.
you walk into the door or the
Yeah,
glass elevator? Yeah. So
yeah.
there is a second finish.
I'll get to that.
All right.
So, and then in
Such
hindsight,
Danish.
I actually kind of wish that none of it was there. Like, I feel like if all the little audio tapes, all the weird, audio, like, narration, all the weird things you read, like, everything you picked up along the way, if that was just gone and you had to fill that in yourself, I feel like all of us would have done a much better job at that than Jonathan Blow and whoever else worked on the story part of this game. Whereas everything else is so, like, well put together and well crafted and really interesting that if you're into that, then I feel like it wouldn't distract. You could just focus on the really cool aspect, which was the puzzle solving mechanic in the game. So yeah, I've kind of come to that after sitting with it for a bit.
Yeah, I wish the areas, like, because the areas had really interesting stuff going on in the game, and I wish they told the story. Like, the environment tells the story. It doesn't have to be specific. I can deal with abstract in that. And there was some components to that with, like, the statues of people and stuff. But the anytime you ran into something that tried to, like, give information or, like, speak an idea, it just threw any imagination you had into, like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Like maybe if you collect them all and do that, but I was just so tired of it. I mean, at a certain point there's clever and there's frustrating, and for me this game was for a while very clever, but then clever, like in a lot of puzzle games, really can turn to frustrating. And then you kind of need that flow to, like, to break through one of those tough puzzles and sort of, like, have a couple easy wins, I feel.
Hmm.
But then, like, it just kept getting so frustrating, and so much travel, and the quick travel mechanism is a fucking boat that's slow as shit, that also has hidden puzzle mechanics in it.
It does,
And
yeah.
it's exhausting. It's exhaustingly clever is how I would describe this game. Like, stupidly obtuse and exhaustingly clever.
Yeah, I think actually you hit on what I think would be, it may or may not be the core indicator or measurement of whether or not you would like this game. And that
Mhm.
is, if we were to tell you, fair audience, that literally everything in the game that you play could possibly be a puzzle, and you think, cool, you'll probably love this game. But if you think, like, Like really, like the back of the boat really could be a puzzle. You're like, yep, the back of the boat could be a puzzle. And you're like, that's stupid. You'll probably hate this game, or you'll probably have a similar response to Kenny, which is that like until you discover that level of detail as far as the puzzle mechanics interwoven into the things that you're sitting on, then it gets a little irritating after that. I could totally see that
Again, though,
happening.
like that didn't really like totally. I thought it was clever. Like initially, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. Like it's fun to find environmental puzzles like that."
But would it be fun to find 180 of them?
Uh, I mean, no, it's fun to do about 100 of these puzzles. That's where I kind of was like, because it really is just like tracing with your finger, essentially. You're like playing worm most of the time with your finger around boxes, and like that mechanic. Well, they spice it up. Oh, look, I'm already thinking about the witnesses and his puzzles. With that yawn, they like spice it up and they play with it so well that you're just like, this is like an achievement in using one concept and like a very simple board. It's the same as like essentially they were given like a board that's like in checkers, and they made chess with it, and they made backgammon with it, and then they made and you're like, this is great, and then I'm like, look at this fucking tree, just go where the fruit is, and like all this weird stuff, and you're like, but it's still on that chessboard, and then you're aligning it because it's translucent. I mean, it was cool, but then like I said, I got to that last year. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I just looked up the puzzles and I was like, yeah, that was clever. Who cares? Let's fucking go. Yeah, that was fine. Okay, you rotate around a pillar and solve the puzzle that way. That's very cute. I get it. It's challenging. Blah blah blah. But I was so bored. I was just like, come on, man. Where's my anime characters with oversized bosoms and huge swords,
I
giving the
think
worst dialogue you could ever hear in your entire life and being objectified?
I think the one problem that being so successful at that concept did create, though, which you mentioned earlier in the podcast, was there are actually times in which you can have enough of an understanding of an existing puzzle mechanic to solve something, but actually not realize that there are two, sometimes three same solutions to that puzzle, and so you'll end up solving it, but feeling like you did it randomly or accidentally, and that you missed out on a puzzle mechanic, and it can really trip you up for a little bit in the game, thinking, oh, I don't actually know how I solved that. Even though you do, you just didn't fully realize that there are like different interpretations of that same rule applied.
Yeah.
Um,
And there were actually different, like, there were puzzle mechanics that were different that looked like similar puzzle mechanics you use. So they
yep.
could be very confusing, like squares and colors and how those work together. Um, I mean,
And
when you
literally
learn it,
color theory, like on top of it all, like there were things with like sound and color theory, not just in it, yeah. I mean, it's very complex as far
I
as
think
how
that was my favorite puzzle. There's a courtyard in a castle that essentially each of the four squares are like sound based.
you
Uh,
the footsteps.
Yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really fun. And then I was like, okay, cool, I'm done. And then I got to the top thing and I'm like, you fucking bastard trying to be clever again. God damn it,
So
Jonathan Blow. You're the worst. But also really talented. Fucking Jonathan Blow.
I feel like we should decide how much we want to spoil the because you've alluded to sort of like environmental puzzles, but like
Yeah,
we should
why would
decide how
we
much we want
spoil
to spoil.
everything?
Well,
There's environmental puzzles everywhere. They're just like you're looking for circles in a straight line
yeah,
throughout the whole thing.
it's not.
It's
So
like roads are like become puzzles and castles and uh
yeah, okay.
shadows.
So I've given you your fair criticism of everything else, but you're not doing the sort of uh, ingenuity of the environmental puzzles justice. I don't think. Like the first time you're
They're all
playing this game,
perspective puzzles,
they're
most of
not
them.
all perspective puzzles. You probably didn't find them all. So you learn these mechanics and you feel like you're applying them just to these puzzles that are out in front of you. You walk up to these doors, you see the pictures, you draw the lines, you open up the doors. And for different people, like
I mean, with
everyone
that
I've spoken with,
explanation, how does that not sound thrilling?
everyone I've spoken with, at a different point in
Everyone.
the game. Um, Sometimes some people don't actually discover until the very end of the game, but you will discover that what we were just alluding to, that literally everywhere you look, the ground, the sky, clouds, water, a door, the back of a door, the switch that you're using, anything in the game, once you understand the shapes and the puzzle mechanics, you can use those to solve the world around you, is the best way I would describe it.
What's the secret ending? Yeah, it's fine. It works
It's
fine.
it's not really a secret. It's not really a secret ending. It's more that you at the end of the game, you know how there's like how I just hinted that sometimes you can get multiple solutions to a puzzle.
Yeah.
At the very end, there's a puzzle that will open up the final elevator that will reset the game for you. But
Oh,
if
isn't
you
there also like a challenge room? Is that
yeah,
what
if
it
you
is?
if you
Yeah.
take a step backwards and you solve that puzzle in the opposite way than the immediate one, then it opens up a special basement in the mountain where the hardest versions of every single puzzle mechanic are laid out just in like a room full of puzzles. And it's that interpretation of like this is the hardest version of
Did
all
you
of the
beat that?
puzzles. Yes,
It's
I've beat that.
amazing. I remember Lord Scotland saying, "No, I'm not fucking doing that." Like after
Now,
seeing you.
here's the deal. Here's the deal. Past that, the final area in the challenge room is then a third area in which, and this is the part that'll really probably excite Kenny, in which there's a record player, and you can start the record with the easiest, with just the switch, the first mechanic you ever use. You can just draw from left to right and start the record player, and it plays in its entirety Hall of the Mountain King. And you have, from the time it starts to the time it finishes, to get through the final area. I haven't been able to do it. I've tried it dozens of times, and I can get to the very end. But it's not only then just the hardest versions of the puzzles, but then for the first time in the game, there's a timed element to it where you have to complete it within a certain time. Otherwise, the whole thing resets again.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that sounds fucking thrilling.
anyways, the environmental puzzles, the thing that it does good, if you're into it, right, is that you get there were times when I got so into the way that it changed how I perceived the game rather than just going through like that. To me was the closest thing I could describe to story. Like it basically, the same way that story will propel you through like in a narrative will propel you through a game, the act of like moving from place A to place B and not just walking, but like walking and looking all around you to try and find something that you may have missed, that was, I think, the most unique and compelling part of this game on top of the puzzle mechanics. And it's so good at doing that if you're into the puzzle mechanics, that it, for the first time in a long time, it actually transitions out of when you're playing the game. Like I started realizing that my brain was so hooked into the puzzle solving mechanic that when when I stopped playing the game and I would go out into real life, I would see shapes in real life and my brain would take a picture of them. Like my brain was still in puzzle solving, picture taking mode, to the extent that our friend, the Scottish Lord, and I started texting each other photos of when we would see like a water stain on a sidewalk that looked like a witness puzzle. Like you start seeing them everywhere in real life. And I think to me that, if I had to guess at sort of like the epitome of like the head up the ass philosophical thought process that was trying to be invoked in this game, that would be my guess. And I think I could have achieved that without any of the bullshit story that we were alluding to. And that's why I think my main criticism is just take that out. It probably then would be, this game would be even less appealing to even fewer people. But to the ones that it did appeal to, like myself, I think it would have been a little bit more powerful and probably would have felt more fun. Like you kind of secretly discovered this story instead of it being sort of like randomly told to you in some weird way.
My final thought is, in response to your seeing the patterns everywhere, is I disconnected so hard from this game. I've never thought about it since. Only when it's brought up in the review context. I just don't give a shit about it.
I mean, normally I would fight hard, but like I totally get it this time, Kenny. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing I can say. I totally get how this would just not be for everyone, and if it's not, I can't. There's no argument I can provide against it. It really is obtuse in many ways, and it's challenging in many ways that are either exciting because that's the sort of stuff that you're into, or you're not going to be into it. And I totally get it. For what it's worth, I was super into it to the point where I've tried to level the most criticisms that I can that I think took away from what I thought were good in the game. But overall, I think if you're really into just logic and puzzle solving and just like meditative thought process and just cumbersome problems that seem like they have like no solution, but you feel a sense of achievement when you finally get it done, then you may love this game. I thought it was really, really
I
great.
feel like that's a very broad stroke. Let's say if you like your iPad and going to places and staring at things, you'll like this. So With that being said, we that's our very lukewarm. Maybe you'll like this game, probably not. Review of The Witness, but it's definitely worth playing through. I think once to see how it all works. Not playing all the way through, mind you, but when it's in a bucket bin or something, find the
Yeah,
CD in the software bin, just like Mist back
I
in the
think it's
day.
fun to try it and discover it for. It's probably fun to try it and see what it's all about for almost anybody. But then pretty quickly on, you'll realize which bucket you fall into. I think.
Pretty easy. All right,
Yeah,
that's it. We're done. We're done with this, and we're done with you. And thank you for listening. I'm Kenny Myers, and with me,
Matthew Anderson.
and now we're going to show you a 30-minute video of a paper flowing in the wind. We're not going to do that. Say goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.